This Tuesday, the 6th of February, Ideas Matter, the educational and citizenship charity, launches Living Freedom University Salons. This is an extensive programme of talks and debates which will take place in universities throughout February and March. Living Freedom supports free speech and aims to renew freedom through education and debate. The salons will bring students and academics together to debate all the big issues. So here to tell me more about it, I am joined by the convener of Living Freedom, Alistair Donald, and student at Trinity College Dublin and Living Freedom organiser, Felice Basbøll. I'm going to come to you first, Alistair. You're the convener of Living Freedom. Do you want to tell us a bit more about it and what you're doing with this tour?
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard endlessly about the problems with free speech in universities. So what we're doing is setting up a series of events where we can put on discussions for students, hopefully academics come as well, where we can talk about controversial issues if need be. We can get everybody along of all political persuasions and viewpoints, put them in a room together and have some fairly open discussions about what it is that we need to talk about in a way that's unfortunately not been the case in universities.
Are there any subjects that you're not going to broach? I mean, there was the case last year of Helen Joyce, who was a guest who was on the show tonight earlier. She turned up at Gonville and Keys College for an event, and the students outside were banging drums, screaming, making noises, intimidating other students so that they couldn't attend. Is that going to happen?
I hope not, and we're not actually discussing transgender stuff in this series, although it has to be said that that particular incident at Cambridge was the thing that motivated the very first of the salons that we did, which we did in Cambridge at that same college.
Yes, I was there.
Which was a response, and you were there, and you gave a talk. So we're not shying away from any issues, but we've got a limited number of events, and we've got topics that we've chosen for this series, and we'll come back to that another time.
Now, Felice, you're still a student, so you're in a very good position to let us know how things are. I keep hearing that students are really weak snowflakes. They can't debate anymore. They're not interested in other ideas. My experience has not been that. I've been to a lot of universities and spoken on campus. I actually have found the opposite. So who's right?
Well, I think it's very interesting because we do hear a lot that free speech is under threat on campus, and I think it is true, but I also think you're right that there is actually, once you go there and once you're in university, there's a lot of students who are very interested in debating ideas and on all subjects. So I think, there is a real spirit for something like Living Freedom to bring students together to discuss controversial issues, and, that's what we're trying to do here.
And is that what attracted you to Living Freedom to begin with?
Yes, exactly. So I first heard of Living Freedom as a summer school, which was a weekend in London, and, the programme was a brilliant put together of everything I was interested in, and it sort of took me out of the university setting. But this way, you kind of bring that same spirit to the very students that are, going to be debating these things out in public in the future, who need to be robustly able to debate all topics, not just the ones that are sort of acceptable in student debating unions.
Very interesting. Can I ask what topics specifically are you going to be broaching during this tour?
Well, we've always, at the summer school that Felice has mentioned and in these salon events, we've always tried to mix up a little bit of history and a little bit of contemporary discussion. So we're interested in people who've contributed something historically. You did John Milton when you spoke for us. We're going to do people like John Locke, but also slightly more contemporary people, C.L.R. James, for example. We're going to do something on Frederick Douglass, all sorts of people from history.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do also some discussions that are around some of the controversial topics today. So, for example, is the social media, bans on social media going to resolve the problems that we always hear about hate speech?
Yes.
Stuff like that. So, a mixture of history and some contemporary discussions. Well.
I mean, that sounds absolutely fantastic. It's really good, this idea of taking it all around the country to various different places. But we do hear also about the NUS, for instance, the Union of Students, and the students who get involved in politics, and that they have a kind of disproportionate voice. And they're the ones who are, I suppose, giving students a bad name and saying we can only have a very narrow avenue of what we're allowed to talk about. Do you think that problem has been exaggerated, Felice?
Definitely. And I think one of the things is that most students aren't interested in student politics at all. Voter turnout in student elections are very low. And I think most students are just trying to get on with their engineering degree or various other topics. So this means that those who decide to go into student politics are a very specific sort of character. Yes. And that can sometimes show you this very monolithic view of what student life is like and what students are like. But really, if you go to your lectures, to your tutorials, there's a wider array of voices, and it's not really as bad as it seems if you look on the Student Union website.
I suppose part of the problem is that the small amount who do go into the student politics have disproportionate clout, don't they? And, when it comes to things like no platforming, for instance, that is a preemptive thing. So we don't really hear about all the people who never get invited because you have this small cluster of students saying, well, don't invite them because they'll cause offence. Do you think offence as a concept is something that students these days are worried about?
I think so. I really think so. But I think it also comes from a good place. And, students are interested in changing the world and making the world a better place. And I don't think that this is a bad thing. I just think that students have kind of come to this, it's sort of an easy way out to ban offensive speech, to make, this all go away by shutting it down. But I think it's really important that students recognise that once they're outside the campus, once they're out in the real world, they are going to encounter, all views, and they'll have to be able to defend themselves against it.
It's interesting, Alistair, that you've chosen to focus the tour on these historical figures. I mean, are you trying to make a particular point about that, taking people back into the past?
Well, no, but I think sometimes people arrive at universities and lots of time in school they've not been able to study some of these historical figures for all sorts of reasons. So I think it's important to come into a university and get a sense that you are part of a historical tradition where freedom and free speech have been very important in the past, to understand some of these people and how their ideas developed and what they said, and I suppose to ask whether they're still important today. I mean, we have a choice as to what to take from the past. It's not necessarily the case that everything in the past continues to be something you want to emphasise, but people need to work through these things and to work it out for themselves. And I think if there's anything about our events that I'd stress, it's that you have to come along and work it out for yourself. It's not a kind of lecture that you write a few notes and you go away afterwards and you've got it. It's kind of a discussion and you need to involve yourself and work it out for yourself.
So critical thinking, in other words, is going to be key.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I gave a talk at a university, Aberystwyth University, and the students turned up and they were great, but the members of staff of the department who had organised this said they wouldn't promote it because my values would upset them or wouldn't be in accordance with their diversity policy or something like that. So is it really the students or is it the academics with an agenda?
Well, I think sometimes, as Felice has said, there's a noisy section of students that probably shut things down. There's some academics who are not into the spirit of free discussion. But I think quite a lot of the time it's university administrators who are taking offence on students' behalf.
Yeah.
And it's them that are the problem. And we've got a new act, a new Free Speech Act coming in higher education and universities just now, which is going to place a legal duty on universities to protect and promote free speech. And that's, I know academics who are very pleased about that because they've had a hard time of it. But I think it's important that it doesn't just become yet another administrative thing that a box to tick. And I think these events are very much about building a culture of free speech. It's got to be something that resonates with people in universities. They've got to feel that they can involve themselves in debating controversial subjects, not shy away from them, because that's the only way that you really resolve what you think about.
Well, this is all sounding very positive. It sounds to me like intellectual inquiry is still very much alive and well at universities. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. I think one of the things that we really want to do in Dublin is bring this kind of intellectual inquiry where you, in your own subject, maybe for me in history, which I study, I can go into whatever I want. But in Dublin or in Ireland, we have the hate speech bill coming in. And one of the things we want to do is make sure that students can use that critical thinking that they are learning in their courses. University courses are still very, very good, but bring that to contemporary issues, things that are important to us today and things that will matter for us.
Fantastic. Well, finally, before you go, can you let us know how can we find out about the various venues, the various events that are going on?
Yeah, you go to Living Freedom website, livingfreedom.org.uk. All the events, which are about 10 of them just now in universities, stretching from Exeter in the south to Aberdeen in the north and over to Ireland as well. So look at the website, find out about them and come along and discuss.
And it's starting next week?
Tuesday. In Oxford, Oriel College, Oxford.
Fantastic. Great stuff. Well, Alistair and Felice, thanks so much for joining me.